Glasses fly like shattered dreams and hopes of happy love. Goyo hears the same sharp accusations from her husband as these glasses. Therio, who is also Goyo's husband, angrily blames his wife for the death of her sister Melissa. The innocent Goyo stares helplessly into his eyes. Goyo innocently asks her lover anxiously. She can't believe her sister is dead. But Therio, clenching his teeth in rage, says that last night it became known that Melissa had died at the hands of her husband, the Marquis of Annecy. Melissa is Goyo's sister. Goyo's eyes glaze over, and she cannot understand whether she is more hurt by her sister's death or by the unpredictable accusations of her beloved husband. Therio, that is now yelling at Goyo, was her childhood friend, and she loved him for a very long time and continues to love him in marriage. The husband tells Goyo that Annecy destroyed the Roubier family because of accusations of treason, but he also killed his own wife. Goyo is shaking and her hand is pressed to her chest, and she feels the hatred from her long-loved husband. Elin can't contain her emotions. Her pretty face hides under her hand, and she doesn't understand how he can be so cruel. Therio doesn't notice or doesn't want to notice Goyo's suffering. He quietly whispers Melissa's name. His frustration replaced anger for a second. While Goyo cries, Therio reveals his thoughts. He claims that Melissa took Goyo's place when the latter refused to marry the Marquise. Sobbing tears, Goyo calls out to her husband while he coolly looks away, trying not to notice her. Goyo's tears further roll down her beautiful face, and she looks hopefully at the man for whom she has given her heart, and says quietly that she has always loved only him and no one else. She wanted to be his wife. That's why she refused the Marquis's proposal, to which Therio turns around out of defiance, saying that he would like to swap Goyo and Melissa. He would like Goyo to be the mistress of the Alte family. Therio can no longer stand his rage expressed in his actions. He clutches tightly at Goyo's shoulders and asks, shouting that fate has not changed their places. Goyo cries she can't resist the man, while Therio screams that it's not your place. He keeps asking questions. He can't recognize Melissa's death. He blames fate that Goyo is in front of him and not Melissa. At that moment, Goyo screams and asks Therio to stop. At the commotion, the servants arrive and they try to calm their master and help Goyo get rid of her husband's tightly clutching hands. Therio grinned softly in despair, tears rolling down his face as he looked through the servants without hearing or noticing. He falls to the floor. His last word is the name of Goyo's sister, and he whispers it quietly as if saying goodbye to someone he will never see again. Goyo, seeing all this, stands next to the servants. Goyo looks at her lover. She asks with sincere love from Therio and realizes that he only needs Melissa. She realizes that he would like to have Melissa in her place and would also like Goyo to accept the fate of being killed in exchange for her sister's life. Goyo recalls the backstory, the beginning of everything. Her stepmother had a daughter, and it was her stepsister, Melissa. Goyo knew even before her marriage to Therio that he had a crush on Melissa, who at that time had sealed her fate with the Marquis. She hoped that Therio would forget Melissa, that it was just a passing feeling that would fade with time. If she knew what was going to happen, she would have married Beetlejuice, and then Melissa would still be alive. Her memories are interrupted by the maid who brings her wine. The beautiful mistress asks the maid where Therio is and learns that his lordship has gone back to work, so he will be back late. She thanked the maid and asked her to leave, making sure no one came in without her permission. Melissa realizes that Therio has another woman who looks a lot like Melissa, her half-sister. Goyo quietly and no doubt drinks the specially prepared pre-poisoned wine. Her thoughts at this moment are that Therio's mistress will comfort him and she can leave without regrets. The last thing before Goyo dies is her eternal love, Therio, she asks him. That if she died, it would be the way he wanted it. She closes her eyes and sees the shining image of her husband looking away indifferently. In the next instant, as if from infinity, bursts a voice that sounds like a woman's and repeats the name of the mistress. It asks to wake up with excitement and care. Mistress opens her flawless eyes. She doesn't realize where she is. She thought for a second she was in heaven. The next thought was that she drank too little poison. The next moment, Goyo sees the maid Annie beside her, who with tears of joy sighs with relief. Because her mistress is all right, Goyo feels a little guilty. Goyo examines everything around her with genuine surprise, and notices that everything around her reminds her of her room when she lived with her parents. Same chairs, tea table, closet, chandelier, everything she was used to when she was under her parents' wing. Goyo can't understand how this is possible because it all burned down in a terrible fire 7 years ago. Her father enters the room and asks Goyo how she is feeling, to which the girl and his daughter falls into a stupor. She looks with a kind of wonder and disbelief at her once living father at the same time. He stands before her in all his glory, smiling and not giving away that he was long dead, his stylish hair as always well-groomed, and his face showing that he is still quite young. The daughter looking at him cannot say a word because she thought she lost him long ago. Her beloved father is alive and well standing in front of her. 4 days later, on a sunny day, the Goyo family mansion shines in the rays of the rising sun. On the plates are the dishes and goodies that Goyo loved as a child and her tea set. Goyo is looking out the window and drinking tea with some anticipation on her beautiful face that shows she is in deep thought. It's unclear to her what could have happened because she woke up in a time when she was only 22. She realizes that the destruction of the chopped family, the marriage to her childhood friend Therio, and Melissa's marriage to Annecy are all in the past and strangely might happen again in the future. She wonders if she's really gone back in time. This time she will fulfill her ex-husband's wish and marry the Marquis of Annecy, who himself proposed to her just like last time, in that past life. Marquis Annecy and part-time her new husband thanks Goyo for accepting his proposal. Goyo says you shouldn't say that, and additionally doesn't forget to say that she is honored to marry Marquis Annecy. He kisses her hand fondly. She looks at the man who stares back with loving eyes that will destroy her family and kill her in the future. Goyo, with a cold-blooded, calculating mind, she will jump into the center of events. She realizes that hope has no place in her life. She realizes that since death awaits her in any case, she will jump into the center of events. She wants to try to live a little better because that's all she needs for her humble soul. Until the day of death comes at the hand of Betelgeuse, she will be a good wife, and her deeds will be sincere and her prayers pure. Events take us to the Rubaiyat Mansion's sunny days still warm the walls of this beautiful building, in which Therio and Goyo are talking at the same moment. Goyo tells Therio that they can't stay friends after the engagement is canceled. With a kind of dead cold blood on her face, she says something she would never have said to Therio before. She is no longer his fiancé nor his lover, and certainly not his friend. Therio looks at his former lover with nervous concern and can't understand how she can talk like that. At that time, Goyo continues her monologue while speaking so calmly that she even manages to drink her favorite tea, says that now her childhood friend has become Melissa's fiancé. She asks Therio to behave appropriately, if only for Goyo's own sake, to which Therio is confused and can't understand what's in his heart. He stands in front of the girl with a kind of frustration and speechlessness to her getting up uncomfortable about it. She's left with broken shards in her soul. She'd better not let her face show what she's feeling right now, because the first thing she did when she got back was break off her engagement to Therio. But in time, she realizes that it was actually very easy she let him go. She can't understand how such a small thing brought her so much suffering in the past. She says the name of Sarah Therio with a sort of wistful intonation and a shadow in her eyes. She looks directly at him sitting across from her and speaks more calmly about her hopes that he won't come to her again for personal reasons. Sir Therio surrenders to the question. He doesn't understand how this happened. His face speaks of confusion and his soul. While Goyo can't stand it and takes her eyes off Therio, her pretty face is as beautiful as ever. Sir Therio sees Goyo's weakness and, showing his strength, bangs his fist and loudly asks about the real reason for what she did because he thinks the Marquis pressured her. While Goyo claims it has nothing to do with the Marquis and she humbly agreed to it herself, Therio says in sincere incomprehension that this is not the life she dreamed of, that she herself said it was impossible to find happiness in a marriage of convenience. She always wanted a loving family, although sincere, pure love and a quiet, peaceful life with her beloved. Goyo's hand starts to shake. She tries to pull herself together and hide her feelings. She can't believe he knew all this but still wanted her sister. She can't take it anymore and stands up abruptly from her chair. She takes one last look at Therio and coldly says that our relationship is over and let him stay out of her sight. But Therio keeps yelling for her to reconsider because she should understand what a political marriage means. He says he doesn't want her to go through that. But Goyo speaks with the same confidence about love as if it were not in her priorities. She adds that time is passing and she is not getting any younger. She needs to get married quickly. She disdainfully asks Therio how he can talk about love. She's sick of his whining. If he talks like that, maybe he'll give her love, to which Therio looks away and tries to justify himself. She bites her thin and sweet lips and says to herself, "Don't let him worry, because even if she had 100 lives, she wouldn't marry him." The guy says he realized a wrinkle appears on his face. His eyes are closed and his eyebrows are wary. He breathes in more oxygen and tells Goyo to marry him and that he will break the engagement with Melissa, to which Goyo is shocked and questioning at him. The guy continues, he says to play the wedding while Goyo says he's lost his mind. And then Annecy appears on the doorstep, dressed in gold-threaded robes with a delicate bouquet of flowers and a smirk on her face. Our heroes look at him and don't understand how he got here. They're a little confused. Therio wonders how Annecy dared to come in here, while Annecy smilingly replies that he doesn't need to get permission to visit his fiancée. Annecy gives a beautiful bouquet to his beloved, while she is a bit confused that he didn't even warn her about his coming. Annecy says with a smile that they have already agreed on the wedding, and he is shocked that the visit requires her ex's permission. He continues to chuckle and joke, "What's the matter with the Empire getting such a law?" to which Therio yells at him in rage. But Annecy keeps joking and says that Mr. Ex-Fiancé can safely go away because he has legs to discuss with the bride. Annecy says goodbye to Sir Therio and tells him not to come to his fiancé's house again. He snaps his fingers, and in a flash of bright light, Therio disappears. He snaps his fingers, and in a flash, Therio disappears with a flash of bright light. Goyo asks in amazement, where did Therio go and how did he disappear? Annecy replies with amusement in his eyes and a smile on his face that he sent this simpleton to a scenic spot to cool off a bit, especially since he is a pretty skillful knight and will be able to return home without any problems. Goyo realizes that it was teleport, and she's just shocked at how well Marquis handles magic, while he claims it's a simple spell and nothing to praise. Also looking at his beloved, he asks her that she call him by his name as it is considered an intimacy of people. He reproaches Goyo for calling her ex-boyfriend by his first name and addressing him by his last name, which upsets him very much. She replies with some uncertainty, trying to justify that Therio is her childhood friend. Annecy tells her to call him Sir Alte or Prince Alte. He also asks about the reason for Alte's visit to her, to which the girl replies that he sympathizes and is responsible for canceling the engagement because he fears that she will suffer in an unhappy marriage. The Marquis Annecy questioningly says that the blame lies on Therio himself, to which Goyo replies that he is not wrong because he likes her sister. Marquis doesn't understand how he can do anything if he himself broke the agreement and had affairs with her sister. Goyo also doesn't understand what the dummy thinks and thinks it's not important anyway. To which Marquis Annecy smiles sweetly back and says that Goyo thinks right, while Goyo thinks where Annecy teleported Therio to. At the same time, just in the dense forest, Therio is trying to figure out where he is and considering the terrain. He is very angry with Betelgeuse and wants to crush him for what he did. But at that moment, when Therio was thinking about revenge, a horrible monster with a terrible slime coming out of its mouth sneaks up behind him. Therio notices the danger, and his eyes meet the monster's mouth, which keeps coming closer and closer. Blood spatters and the sun rises in the sky. The sword stabbed into the monster's hole is covered in its blood. Therio sits on a defeated monster with a navigational artifact in hand and wonders about its location. Finally, his efforts paid off, and an artifact suggests he is in the Avalanche Mountains. He is furious with the Marquis for daring to teleport him to a place that the royal family has declared forbidden because it is a haven for monsters, and no human has set foot here in over 4 years. He shouts threateningly, and his scream can be heard throughout the forest. If it were heard by a single living soul, it would realize that the person making such a scream is in a terrible rage. 3 weeks later, a wedding ship with white sails and the emblems of noble families between which the blood union will take place stays near the pier, where people gathered in colorful clothes. Her beautiful face is hidden under a veil. Well, even so, on a sunny day you can see her extraterrestrial beauty. Goyo is excited to finally marry Betelgeuse and looks embarrassed with bouquet in hand at the honored guests. The maids come up and say that the beginning is coming. Soon they are helping Goyo to make her wedding dress look as good as possible. Her mom appears behind her and asks Elin if she is ready, for which the girl turns around and is quietly embarrassed. She sees her beautiful as-night mom and the shy Melissa that came along with her. Mom says that the influence of Marquis Betelgeuse is really great, and she is surprised that the lavish wedding is already ready, even though the proposal is only 3 weeks old. Melissa also wants to say something. She looks at her sister, and she too notices her intention. Melissa sincerely congratulates Goyo on her wedding. She wishes her a happy marriage and long life, while smiling sweetly and clasping her hands to her chest. Goyo, who knows her future, takes Melissa's words with a deeper meaning and thanks her sister and asks if her wedding is next year, because she is afraid that she will not be able to attend it. Well, Melissa says it's no big deal and that her sister will have a lot of work and won't have time to celebrate. A shadow falls over Goyo's beautiful face. She asks Melissa with some guilt in the words, "Is there no news from Sir Tyrant, and if he has not returned from the mountains?" To which Melissa replies that he sent a message saying that he will be delayed for a while. Melissa says that it is very dangerous in those mountains, and she cannot understand why he decided to train in such a place. Goyo has to lie that she doesn't know, because she can't say he was teleported by Marquis Annecy. The feast is in full swing. The priest stands at the frame and says the words that priests say in situations like this at a time when lovers and their families are in anticipation. Goyo is upset she can't understand why she's sad, while Annecy is confident. The priest asks the bride about her vow that she will love her husband until death. After his words, Goyo looks at Annecy for the one who will bring her death. Annecy, in turn, smiles and looks at her fiancé with some inspiration as if to cheer her up. Goyo looks away for a moment. Her eyes stare through space. She closes them and speaks quietly. What swears at her words were loud enough for all present to hear her. At this point, Annecy doesn't take her eyes off her. He looks at her with anticipation as he moves closer to her, and the fires of playfulness burn in his eyes. He kisses the bride, putting one arm around her waist and the other on her stomach. Goyo accepts the kiss with a kind of doom, but she feels calm and warm in the moment. One might even forget that this man will kill her in the near future. The night comes, and the wedding ship is still going through the sea, and the white sails are faithfully carrying it after the wind. On the deck, the beautiful Goyo looks out to sea. Her outline is as beautiful as the ship she stands on. But on this cold night, someone comes up behind her and covers her with a cloak. She turns around, and in her eyes you can immediately see the recognition of the man who approached. This is her fiancé and now husband, Marquis Annecy. He smiles as always, and his eyes warm as if in them really burns, giving warmth and cozy flame. Goyo says he is very caring while being a little embarrassed, while Annecy replies that she is his wife and he cannot do otherwise. Goyo tries to taste the words spoken by the Marquis Annecy and repeats it to herself. She can't get used to it because only Therio had called her wife before in that life. At that time, Annecy goes on to say that now she is not chopping but Madame Goyo Betelgeuse. Goyo smiles a little and says she's not used to it yet, to which Annecy is surprised because she hasn't smiled yet. Goyo further recalls that in her past life, Therio never called her Madame Alte. She recalls that it was like he didn't think of her as a wife. He called her by her maiden name. Her recollection is interrupted by the voice of Marquis Annecy, who has moved closer to her. He asks his wife why she did not become the Duchess of Roubier. Annecy looks at her husband in surprise and says that she is not good at small talk. Annecy is surprised and asks what she is dreaming about. Goyo smiles quietly and, a little embarrassed, admits with all sincerity that he wants a loving family where everyone will be happy. She tells with more certainty that after the video marriage of her parents, in which there was not an ounce of happiness, she dreamed of marrying the one she loved and create a family with him, have children, and live a normal life happily ever after. She asks Annecy that it's probably boring and he's not interested. Annecy says very seriously that not at all, and the fire in his eyes grows hotter. He says he knows how hard it is for people in their situation to find that, to which Alan says she agrees with him, which is why she gave up. Even though the dream is gone, it's peace of mind. She asks Annecy what his dream is. Annecy looks at her with interest. He stares intently and at the same time ponders that he needs power. Goyo stares back with some loss and begins to remember the cause of Melissa's death in her past life. Annecy continues and says that he needs absolute power so that no one can get in his way. His voice changes and becomes rough in his eyes, sparks disappear and coldness appears. He says that this goal is more important to him than 1,000 lives. Goyo looks at him fearfully and sees a different Annecy than the one who was standing next to her 5 minutes ago. And in this tense moment, Annecy laughs and says he's joking because now he just wants to enjoy married life, to which Goyo can't even say anything because she's really scared. She looks at Annecy with a certain smile and says that his dream will soon come true. Annecy Betelgeuse destroyed the Roubier family, one of the 2 great Herculean families. As the illegitimate son of the past emperor, he was given the title of Archduke. He's capable and experienced enough to stand up for himself, so no one dares say he's just a bastard child. Goyo figures nothing much will change, and by the time his dream comes true, she'll be dead. Goyo's musings are interrupted by Annecy's voice asking her opinion about the honeymoon. He kneels down and holding his hand over his heart says quietly that he may not give love, but he will cherish it as much as possible. Goyo says with an all-understanding look that she believes that he won't give her the love she so desperately wanted at this moment. They move closer to each other, and their lips touch in a passionate but still not loving kiss. At this point, Goyo asks in her mind for Annecy not to love her because she no longer wants to trust something so untrustworthy. Therio grits his teeth in anger, all dirty and scruffy. He's been through something he doesn't want to go through ever again. People around him look at him like he's some kind of beggar. Even though his shabby suit and the dirt on him can't hide his noble origins, the ball in his hands show his danger. The girls ask what could have happened to him. They are amazed at how he looks. People around here can't understand how you can walk around like that. They think he might have fallen into a ditch. In the back, some boy is screaming that this uncle stinks, while his mom tries to calm him down so he doesn't scream. Therio's anger rises even more. He can't hold back the emotion his face expresses only desire together. He arrives at Duke Roubier's estate, his sword still sharp and gleaming in the sun. He calls for Annecy Betelgeuse to come out and fight him. The guards notice Therio and ask who he is and how dare he come in here. Therio notices the guard and looks at him with anger, important news to tell everyone about how Therio Alte has returned. There's a little commotion at the Marquis Betelgeuse's estate where they learn the news. A servant named Exer Freybeek says that Therio returned yesterday. His information is not to be doubted because he has been working for the Betelgeuse family for a long time. Annecy is disappointed because he thought Therio would come back later. He thinks he should have shoved him away. The Marquis orders Exer Freybeek to make sure Goyo doesn't find out about anything. The servant notices that Annecy cares very much for Miss Goyo. Annecy notices the servant's words, and a shadow falls over his face as he doesn't know what to say to those words. But he decides to tell Exer Freybeek that she is now his wife and also the mistress of the estate, and that he dare not say so anymore. The servant apologizes and wants to ask something inappropriate, to which Annecy gives him permission to ask a question. Exer Freybeek notices that Mrs. Goyo looks strange lately, even though he doesn't know her. The Marquis shouts at Exer Freybeek because he could ask such stupid questions, at which the servant got very agitated. Annecy argues that Exer Freybeek should keep his head clear of useless things and get on with business. The servant agrees with his master and says he will follow him out the door. Annecy is left alone, his face expressing nothing good. A smile is not on it, and his eyes are hidden in the shadows. He says that as expected, nothing has changed. His expression is getting more normal. Husband and wife stand in the flower meadow, and Goyo admires the beauty of the place, something Marquis Annecy is very proud of. He loves to see his wife enjoy seeing such beauty of the grounds of his estate. He notices how beautiful she is, her lips tantalizing and her eyes like little diamonds. He asks Goyo if she likes it here, to which she replies that she likes it very much. And it's not like this place is made of flowers, but of gems. Annecy guesses from her tone that she doesn't really like brightly colored things. He says he didn't think about it and should have asked her opinion first, which is his mistake, to which Goyo replies that no, though the brightness of the roses is a little overwhelming, she doesn't hate them. Annecy notices that the gardener must have worked very hard, and he says it's his little hobby because with magic everything becomes much easier. Goyo wonders if he created this garden. She didn't know it was possible with magic, to which Annecy replies that magic can be used for both attack and wish fulfillment, depending on the wishes of the sorcerer. Goyo says she is very much impressed. She didn't know about this, her words encouraging Annecy. He asks Elin if he can teach her magic, to which she looks at him thoughtfully and doesn't know what to say. She starts to get defensive and says she doesn't want it because she can't use it. She says that when she was a child, she tried for a long time, no matter how much money and time was spent on it all, to no avail. She has no talent for magic. Goyo admits that it's unlikely she'll be able to learn magic, and it's likely to be a bad waste of time. Annecy smiles. His eyes fill Goyo with confidence. He says that a man can never be sure of what he is capable of, especially when your teacher is the best magician in the world. He doesn't understand, how can you worry about anything while smiling quietly? Goyo also smiles and says that she will think about it because there is still a long way to go. Happily and family life. Events are moving to the palace. It's starting to get dark. The sun is setting over the horizon. Annecy shows the bedroom to his wife. It is custom made by the best designers of this world, and the furniture is beaten from the most expensive fabrics. Also, Annecy says it's the 4th floor, so for convenience, Goyo can use the portal. The girl says that a portal inside the mansion is very convenient, to which Annecy says that any magician's estate has one. Goyo wonders how there is only one bed here, and she doesn't realize where his bedroom is, to which he looks at her bewilderedly. Annecy doesn't understand and asks Goyo what, doesn't she want to share a room with him, on his face of surprise. Goyo questioningly looks at the Marquis, her face expressing an emotion of misunderstanding. She tells the Marquis that she misunderstood him and apologizes for her words. She thinks about it and realizes why she thought that. The reason she said that was because with Therio they had separate rooms and she thought it was normal. Marquis sighs in relief and realizes that Goyo doesn't mind sharing a bedroom because she confirms it. But inside, Goyo realizes how unhappy she was with Therio while they lived together in that life. Goyo is embarrassed and she doesn't know how to present it properly, but she decides to ask about how Annecy feels about not rushing into having children. Annecy says, a little embarrassed, that it's a little early for that too. At this point, his face looks very cute. Alan says she's going to take birth control so she doesn't get in trouble. Annecy says there's no need for them because they have side effects. He says it's better to just take it slow because it's a political marriage. He looks at his wife and says with tenderness in his voice that he cares about her first and foremost and doesn't want to hurt her. He says it's best to avoid things that could ruin her health, to which Goyo is a little embarrassed. She can't believe he cares about her so much. It's true, though, she feels a little stiff. She tells the Marquis that she agrees with what he says is right for the moment. Then the story takes us back to the past where Ellen passed away, and the Marquis Annecy finds out about it and can't believe his servant's words. A servant tells that Goyo died of a heart attack, saying that she used silverbell extract to lower her blood pressure. Exer Freybeek says the problem was the birth control meds combined to cause the side effect. The servant goes on to say that few people in Dopesh talk about it, not to mention that she was very worried at the time Annecy can't say a word. People say it was an accident, but he says he thinks it was on purpose. He yells at his servant, saying it was definitely not an accident, to which the servant looks surprised in response. Annecy goes on and says that even though she was married, her mother's name was Asla Valverde, and she came from Depeche. He says that she died of a heart attack caused by a silver bell, so Goyo decided to follow in her mother's footsteps. Annecy says to take her body back to her dodacha. He comments that it's a good thing because she chose to do it that way, and the body is well preserved, to which the servant asks that Alta probably won't give her up that easily. Annecy replies that it must be done at all costs, and they have no choice. He puts on his cape and walks confidently. Goyo is lying in a coffin with her favorite flowers at the bottom of it when Therio screams and begs her not to leave him. He begs her to wake up. At this point, Annecy appears and asks Therio why he didn't take care of her when she was alive. He says that Therio used to neglect Goyo and why he is now starting to cringe. Therio and his butler notice Annecy, and at first they don't understand what's going on. Therio recognizes Annecy from his eyes. Tears disappear from his eyes. He turns on his anger and looks at his rival with fury. With his need to get a sword that is made of steel that could only be found so its sharpness is extremely strong. Therio brings his sword up to the Marquis's neck and shouts a threatening accusation at him. He says Annecy was involved in the destruction of her family, and he doesn't understand how he dared to come here. He yells at him to get out of here because there's no mercy for him and he's ready to use his weapon, to which Annecy looks him in the eye without any fear. Therio tries to strike, but Marquis's magic shield reflects it back. Therio's in shock. He doesn't realize what just happened. He wanted to hurt Annecy but couldn't. Annecy finally shows his first emotion, and it's an evil grin Therio is too weak for him to handle. Annecy, with his trademark smile, says he'll only leave here with Goyo's body and no other way, his face expressing complete confidence in his words. Therio thinks Annecy is crazy because only a crazy person would say such a crazy thing. Therio threatens Annecy and says that if he dares to touch the girl, the Alte family will not be left out, while Annecy confidently approaches the girl's body. Annecy, looking at Goyo's dead face, says it won't matter whatever they do. The Marquis tells the dead Goyo that he is sorry for what happened, but he had no other choice. His face expresses a dead calm. He snaps his fingers, and unprecedented magic happens that enchants everyone in the room. The coffin with the beautiful Goyo rises into the air. People are in shock while Annecy does not remove the confident smile from her face. The guy yells at him to leave her. He doesn't know what he's doing. He wants him not to take Goyo away from him. Annecy says that you should have thought of it earlier, and that unlike him, Marquis always keeps his word. The last thing Annecy said was goodbye at his and Goyo's place. A magic symbol appears, and everyone in the room is shocked at what is happening. Following, Therio screams that it can't be, and he asks for her back. His scream is heard throughout the entire estate. The story shifts to the present now. Moonlight enchants a young couple's room. They are quietly and peacefully sleeping in their bed for the first time together. At that moment, Goyo can't sleep. She doesn't know the reason for it, but she wonders if Annecy is asleep. She turns to him and tries to see what he's doing. Favor. The moonlight illuminates the room well enough. Annecy is probably asleep. She turns to herself and reflects that she's never shared a bed with anyone. She's afraid to take a deep breath because he might hear. She recalls that in a previous life she never spent the night with Therio, despite the fact that they were lovers and even got married. She closes her eyes and starts thinking about Marquis. She remembers everything that happened to her during that time and how he treated her. She imagines the Marquis and thinks about him, and her thoughts are that she wishes she could see him without the mask, and wishes he would keep it on until the end. At the same time, Annecy can't sleep either. He has no thoughts and just stares into his pillow. He, too, wonders if the girl is awake and wants to see how she is turning out that all this time he knew she was awake, and seeing that she finally fell asleep. He's relieved that at least she hasn't been up all night so he can get up quietly. He leaves the room where he leaves the girl alone quietly and peacefully sleeping in a warm, soft bed. The events move to some basement where someone is asking for help behind an ajar door. A beat-up guy in mud and maybe even blood on his clothes with his hands tied behind his back. The man who was in this cellar asks who is here. Annecy comes into the cellar and asks if he remembers Count Eliom. The Count can't believe his eyes. He looks at the Brune who has walked in, a look of fear in his eyes. Annecy, in all his glory, walks into the basement with a face that expresses complete confidence in his actions. Annecy leans over Count Tim that it's not hard to call an illegitimate child a prince. He asks to introduce himself again and says he's Annecy Betelgeuse. There is a questioning shout throughout the basement, and you can see that the basement is designed to cause as much misery as possible to the people in captivity here. The Count can't believe it's the Marquis standing in front of him. He's in shock, and his eyes are filled with terror and fear. While Annecy says he's not lying and he is who he says he is, he has an evil smirk on his face. He recalls that the future from the birth of commoners he tried to promote himself. Thus he quickly gained fame and received the title of Marquis. He tells his hostage that he is who he is now because of it. While the prisoner thinks it's absurd because the prince sort of sold him into slavery, Annecy says he's not wrong and says the man who bought it was named Valverde. The hostage doesn't believe it was Valverde, but a new face. Annecy enters the room and says that the captive must have heard of them. The head of the family can control the whole world. With 3 fingers, he holds 35% of the underground capital. Exer Freybeek came into the room. Turns out he's not only a servant of Annecy, but also a representative of the head of the clan. The captor says that Valverde is really involved in this, to which Annecy asks that now the captor understands the situation he is in. The captive says he knows nothing and it's all Rubier's fault. His eyes can't bear to look at Annecy's intense gaze. Annecy smiles. He doesn't believe the prisoner knows anything. He thinks the Baron is lying. Annecy asks, "From whom then the Empress received information about the illegitimate child? Is it also from the rubes to which the man cannot say anything?" Annecy runs out of patience. He takes the Baron by the hair and asks him who told the Empress about the illegitimate child while she was secretly supporting the second prince. And the first prince and Roubier decide to keep it quiet. Marquis asks where Maisel is with a face that doesn't promise anything good, to which the prisoner replies with a kind of doom that Maisel is dead. Annecy beats the prisoner and asks him how many more teeth he has left. The Baron begins with horror and pain at the Marquis. The prisoner says that if you kill him, Annecy won't know where Maisel is. He says he just wanted to destroy Alicia out of jealousy, so he told the Empress. Annecy orders a man not to talk like that about his mother and tells him to be respectful. Captive asks what Annecy doesn't like and why he would take such abuse. He says that Marquis couldn't have achieved his position if he hadn't sold it to Verde. Baron says that now Annecy Marquis A could spend his whole life in the shadows. Wouldn't it be better to keep a low profile if you've gained status? But Annecy asks what's so great about being a Marquis. Annecy says it's not enough he's tired of being looked down upon all the time and now he wants to return the favor. He wants to be a duke himself. He has a look of superiority on his face when he thinks about it. Also, Marquis adds that this is not his final goal and he has room to strive further. He thinks that with a title like that, he can vie for the throne and have everything. Annecy smiles slyly and says he can make it work if there are no direct descendants left. In response, Marquis hears that he is mad, and it is treason, at which point Exer Freybeak hands his master a sword. Annecy puts his blade to Count Elium's mount and asks him where the traitor Maisel is. His blade bleeds the prisoner. The terrified Count finally gives up and says that Maisel has boarded a ship and is headed for Portlando. Annecy removes the sword from the Count's neck and gives it to Exer Freybeak, who orders the Count to be killed, to the surprise of even the servant, not to mention the frightened prisoner. The Count begs for mercy. He frantically screams for them to stop. He wants to live and asks for mercy. The master came out of the cellar after him and says he killed the Count and is surprised the master didn't do it himself. To which Annecy replies with a slight disdain that she can't stand the smell of blood. Also leaving, he says that his wife has a sharp charm, to which Exer Freybeak just keeps silent. Later, a servant asks the Lord, does he really want to take the throne for himself? He can't believe he has such great ambitions. Mr. answers that he's not sure yet because he was only trying to be better than the others in the hope that it would at least fill his heart a little. The servant asks what the Lord will do if his dream does not materialize, to which the Lord asks Exer Freybeak about his opinion if Annecy Betelgeuse were to take the throne. The gentleman standing by the window says he's going to be head of state because he wants to be. He claims that no one in this empire shares his opinion and that even if he becomes emperor, he will be overthrown anyway. Exer Freybeak argues with the host that nothing will change, but Annecy says that if nothing is done, no one will notice that he exists. The servant asks if Annecy thinks it would have been better if Valverde hadn't saved him, to which the Marquis replies that Valverde saved him, and he is grateful for it. Annecy says he has no other way. The only thing he's holding on to is his promise to Chloe. Also, Marquis asks the services if he knows anything but information about Therio, to which Exer Freybeak talks about the ducal title, which originally belonged to his mother, Giselle Alti. After her death, the title passed to her husband. Therio was 4 years old at the time. Annecy didn't know it, but he wants to dispense with sentimentality. He also learns that he's led a quiet life and has a younger brother now 18 years old. He is also not deprived. So he can become the heir, Exer Freybeak asks. Does the gentleman want to change the head of the Alta family, to which he says he is thinking about it. Annecy saw in the document a picture of Therio's mother. He is surprised at how much she resembles Madame Goyo, but claims his wife is 100 times more beautiful. Annecy understands now why Therio is so attached to Goyo. It wasn't a very difficult mystery. The events take us to a seemingly fairy tale mansion where young children are playing, laughing, joking. Apparently, it's an event where children from various noble families have gathered. At the same time, a little girl bites her lip and stands alone, looking very unhappy in the midst of all this fun because she is dressed differently from everyone else. It's little Goyo. And at that moment, someone calls out to her from behind and she turns around at the sound. She sees Therio in front of her, apologizing sincerely for being late and feeling embarrassed. Little Goyo asks Therio if her dress looks weird because he picked it out, to which little Therio can't answer. But still, he realizes what is expected of him and compliments the girl that modest things fit her perfectly. Little Goyo is embarrassed to hear Therio's compliments, but she looks around and sees that everyone's wearing pretty dresses unlike her. It's a little embarrassing. Despite the fact that everyone is wearing fancy dresses, Goyo says, despite the guy to his face, she says she wants to wear a simpler dress because she doesn't need the extra attention, to which Therio says that her mom liked those dresses too. Dumas tells Goyo that his family is chivalrous, so he hates flashy clothes. He's heard that paying so much attention to appearance is a fool's errand. To which Goyo replies with some alarm that there is nothing wrong with liking beautiful things. The guy tries to calm the girl down and takes her hands. He says she's beautiful even in plain clothes. Goyo is very embarrassed. She can't believe what she's hearing, but the guy says he's serious. Therio wants Elin to promise that she will only wear things like this in the future. Goyo is a little confused because she likes a pretty dress. She can't make a promise that she won't do what she really likes. He tells her that she's already beautiful, that he hates luxury and doesn't want the extra attention. He, with a smile on his face and with eyes in which hope burns, asks her for a promise. Goyo, seeing Therio trying to ask her for that promise, was confused. She promises the boy, with some disappointment, that she will only wear dresses like these. But then the boy accuses her of breaking her promise. A grown-up Therio starts strangling Goyo and accusing her of marrying Beetlejuice. He shouts that luxury doesn't suit her. He chokes her harder and keeps accusing her of not keeping her word to wear only simple things. Goyo tries to say something. Therio says he only loves Melissa but only married Goyo because of her stubbornness and blames her for now leaving him and marrying someone else. Goyo cries out in pain and helplessness, while Therio promises to make it even more painful and even more miserable. If she keeps doing this, he screams at her to come back to him. But Goyo does not give up and tries to resist the man. She screams that she does not want him. Tears of pain and suffering roll from her eyes. And then Goyo finally wakes up in a cold sweat, and her hand is clutching her nightdress with all her might. After a minute, she realizes it was just a dream. It was scary enough, but it's just a dream and there's no reason to be afraid. And then she hears Annecy's voice. He asks if Goyo is awake. Goyo sees Annecy in front of her, who looks worriedly at her with a face that expresses confidence. He asks the girl if she's having a nightmare with him. He wishes he'd woken her up sooner, while Goyo tries to tell her it's okay. Marquis takes the girl by the shoulders as gently as possible, and in the next instant, he wraps his arms around her, pulling her tighter against him, trying to keep her warm and mumbling something sweet in her ear, while the girl was not expecting such tenderness. She's a little confused, embarrassed. You can see on her face that she's never been cared for like this before. She starts to say something because the hug goes on too long and she feels uncomfortable, even though Therio's touch is nice. But Therio reassures the girl, saying she can push him away at any time. The girl realizes that there is nothing dangerous, and she finally relaxes and feels protected in the hands of the Marquis. She begins to tell that Therio appeared in her dream, at which point Annecy listens attentively to her. Goes on to say that Therio tried to strangle her and asked her why she didn't keep her promise. Clinging to the man's shoulders, she says it was so natural that she was frightened at the time. Annecy reassures her and says that when he meets her, he will do the same with Therio. The girl says there's no reason to do that because it's just a dream, but Annecy doesn't think so, and he claims that even so, this guy still committed a crime. Goyo tries to see if Annecy is joking, but then he can't hold back his smile and admits it was a joke. Goyo says it wasn't very funny. The guy at that moment brings her hot tea to calm her down. The girl sincerely thanks her husband. She realizes it was a horrible nightmare she still can't get over. But she's better now. But she can't understand if it's because of him and the care he's shown her. As the couple talked, the first snow fell outside. At this point, Goyo turns to Annecy and asks him for a favor. She wants him not to destroy the rose garden because she likes it and wants to go there more than once. The guy is surprised at the girl's sudden change. She seems to be softer and more honest with herself. He asks her what she said, as if she didn't like the garden. Goyo looks at her husband's face with some consideration. After thinking, she said she wanted to try to like these flowers. A rare smile appeared on her face, which to the boy seemed more beautiful than all the flowers in his garden. Goyo tells her husband that Therio told her to wear only modest clothes and refuse anything fancy, but she thinks she might like fancy things too. She says she's been avoiding it because she's not used to it and it's new to her and she has little experience. Annecy says she shouldn't listen to this guy. Let him keep walking around and she should do what she likes. In response, the girl giggles quietly and thinks Annecy is right not to lock herself in a frame of reference. She imagined that picture again of them standing in that hall that very day. She imagined she'd left him first because he hadn't kept his word, and there was no point in her keeping hers. Little Therio stands and stares after the departing girl with anger in his eyes. Then the events continue at the Roubier mansion where Melissa meets Therio. She says she hasn't seen him for a long time and smiles sweetly at him. Therio stands in front of her and looks at her dress, which to him reminds him of Goyo's modest dress. He thinks it's the first time he's seen the police in that outfit. It's unusual for him. She's cute, though. But Goyo, such a dress suits more. Seeing the disappointed face of Therio, Melissa asks what he doesn't like. She also asks him the reason for the visit and guesses maybe he wants to see her sister. But Therio replies that no, he can no longer think about the fate of a man who foolishly married a husband he hasn't even known for a month and now spits on her fate. He says he didn't come here for that reason, that he wants to call off their engagement. His words are disappointing Melissa. She starts asking him what's wrong, but he says his head's been a mess lately and he needs some time to think. He says that maybe he needs more training and he doesn't know what he wants to do, to which Melissa looks at him with surprise. She says she understands and she suggests we take it slow because it's not urgent anyway. To which Therio agrees and says he's going to be a little busy today and he's going to go. But the girl grabs his hand and asks him to wait. She wants to tell him that her mom would be back soon and maybe he wanted to meet her before he left. But the guy coldly stares at her. He asks if she spoke to Mrs. Keisel. He says he doesn't have time and has urgent business. He quietly leans over to the girl's face, and she thinks he wants to kiss her on the cheek, so she peacefully stands still. Apparently, she doesn't like what he's doing so much she wouldn't mind giving it up, but she tolerates it anyway. The guy says he's leaving, and the girl waves at him without smiling. When the guy closes the door, she clenches her teeth and glares at him with rage. He's really pissed her off. She starts wiping the kiss spot and says to herself that she wouldn't even look at that trash if it wasn't from the Alte family. But at that moment, her mom walks into the room and sees her daughter rubbing her cheek red where Therio kissed her. Her mother is shocked at what she's doing to her skin, and she wants to talk to her daughter. Droplets of moisture gather in Mom's eyes as she guesses what happened a moment ago. She tells the girl to come in to see her and leaves with the servants to go into the study. Melissa agrees with her mom. She's a little embarrassed to be seen like this. She's disappointed. Then the events move to the Beetlejuice mansion, where the atmosphere is less gloomy, although the sun shines the same in this place. The warmth of the people living here is felt in this place. The young maid asks her mistress how she slept and how her trip went. Mistress Goyo recognizes her favorite servant girl and smiles happily back at her, though she woke up a minute ago. Mistress is happy that Annie transferred here, but Annie says it's not a problem because she's getting double pay here. The next moment, the maid realizes that she has said too much and covers her talking mouth. Goyo laughs and says, "That isn't it wonderful?" Annie asks Mistress if she wants to go out to breakfast in the garden because Mistress asked her. While the maid talks about the delicious food and the beautiful weather outside the window, Goyo wonders if the scent of flowers will be too strong. Annie asks Mistress if she wants to admire the view, which Mistress doesn't mind because yesterday she decided that such things are not bad. She thinks she'll do what Annecy says, so she agrees to go to the garden. The garden was truly beautiful and lovely, and in the center was a gazebo with a table with delicious food on it. Goyo is a bit mesmerized by the amount of colors and things. That said, she can't smell the colors while her husband looks at her slyly. She asks Annecy why she can't smell the flowers. Is she sick? But Annecy laughs and says it's just magic. Goyo doesn't understand how this can be possible. Her pretty face was a reward for the Marquis, who, after fixing his eyes on her, decided to say something witty. He said it was easier to answer that it was impossible for him, but the girl was not confused and commented that it was impossible for him to be modest. To which Annecy speaks of her spouse's guesswork, and they sit down at the table together. Next, the girl sees the beautiful dishes on the plate and is a bit bewildered by their elegance. But Marquis smiles sweetly and doesn't see anything strange, while the girl still can't take her eyes off that sandwich. Still, the girl commented that this sandwich has a slightly odd presentation, to which the spouse replies that such a nice and fancy sandwich is what she said yesterday. So he decided to try and decorate it. The girl's in shock. Did Marquis Annecy Beetlejuice make the food himself? She tastes a bite and a joyful sound bursts out of her mouth. She's just shocked at how good it is. Her eyes are burning with emotion. She asks the guy how he managed to make it so good. He replies that he just decorated the sandwich chef. Goyo says he takes it back, which makes Annecy uncomfortable. Goyo smiles and enjoys the nature you don't see that often before. Annecy asks Goyo if she wants to learn magic, but she's not sure she's interested in learning something, but she doesn't have any skills, so it's hard to tell if she'll succeed. Annecy replies that if it is interesting, then you have to do a challenge, and it doesn't have to be magic, it can be like horseback riding, drawing, dancing, anything. In some anticipation, he agrees, and she smiles back. Annecy, but then he says she should try it now, she didn't expect him to be so pushy. But Annecy calms her down and tells her to just listen to him carefully. First, we have to do a short excursion. Each person has an attribute is based on talent. Next, Annecy pours out a huge amount of terms and phrases on the girl. The girl's a little rattled, and she didn't quite understand what Annecy was talking about. Annecy laughs, but not angrily, but rather warmly meanwhile, as the girl slowly began to lose confidence and ask for the opportunity to back out. If it's not too late. Annecy apologizes and says he made it hard on purpose because Goyo is cute when confused, and he likes to look at her face at that moment. Goyo doesn't understand whether it was his jokes again. She asks Annecy to explain in simpler terms, and Annecy says that besides talent, you need something else. The trick is to turn image into form. That's what he's doing right now. But he calms the girl down and says he can show another way. He says it's more like creating a template that transforms the shape. He says this is often called fortitude, and gives an example of how it can be used. Goyo asks Annecy what kind of spirit power he has in mind. In turn, he says it's not hard to control if you have a little imagination, but it takes a certain emotion to unleash it. He takes an object from the butler at that moment. Goyo wonders what he means when he talks about emotions, to which the guy replies that strong negative emotions are much harder for happy people to deal with. He hands her an object that looks like a watch and tells her to try it herself. Goyo looks at the object and thinks how to use it properly. She takes it into her hands, unintentionally touching Annecy's hands. The object emits some kind of glow that looks like rainbow rays. Ellen touches the object, and the arrow starts spinning frantically. Goyo is a little embarrassed. She doesn't know if she can do it. She's never tried it before. To which Marquis tries to calm her down and says it's all within her power. He says everyone has their problems and it's normal. Ponders his words and stands up more resolute in her actions. Her modest hand approaches the subject. Annecy notices that a good reaction to mana is coming out, and it's a good sign he says to add some of his mana that, and wraps his arm around her from above. She is even more embarrassed by the intimacy of touch with her husband. Their hands touching the wallpaper added their manu, and look at the result. Goyo says she felt a special sensation and asks Annecy if that's what he meant. To which Annecy replies that fire is fear, earth is loneliness, wind is rage and water. At these words, some strange action takes place around them, and a vortex of water appears. Goyo looks up and sees more and more water materializing. She is thrilled with what is happening, and even more amazed that half of this process was created by her. Annecy replies that yes, it is the spirit of water, and he didn't think it would be so easy, but he praises Goyo and says she did well. To present a form so that the spirit does not disappear because this form is unstable. The girl doesn't know what to imagine, at which Annecy guffaws, naming examples of a tree person, maybe something specific. The girl starts thinking about something specific. She imagines a lake, the sea, and eventually she visualized this shape. Annecy waits in frenzied silence for whichever form the girl chooses, and she finally presented her to their gaze. He appears. It's a water dolphin in the glow of the bright sun and combines everything beautiful a girl could know about water. Turns out this dolphin is very small, and it's very unusual for a girl to see such a thing, especially when it's created by her hands. She can't believe it's finally working out, so Annecy tells her to come up with a name for it. She's not thrilled that she has to come up with a name, but her boyfriend's threatening her that if she doesn't, she'll go to physics with him. The girl thinks long and hard about what name she should choose for this sweet creature. She thinks about the name and decides that if it's between Vodin and Vodin, the latter is the better choice. She says his name out loud and the guy hears it too, then Vodin evolves and stands up better with new patterns and body parts. The girl watches this beautiful transformation of the Vodin fly up, and in the sunlight it floats above them. The next moment he disappears, a little scaring Goyo, but Annecy explains that there is nothing to worry about. He will reappear when you call his name. He congratulates Goyo and says that she first met a spirit. It's a great honor. Goyo turns a little blue and looks at Annecy in response to his words. The next moment she faints, and a flustered Annecy catches her in his arms. He pulls her close to him and tries to warm her with his warmth. The girl very quickly opens her eyes in Annecy's arms, and he asks in her how she is feeling. The girl thanks Annecy and says that her legs just suddenly gave out, to which Marquis comments that summoning the spirit uses up a lot of energy. He tells her she'd better rest, and he'll see her off. But Goyo, enchanted smilingly, says she can either get her own servants or get her own servants. Annecy refuses to let her go and quietly and says no. He too smiles back at her adorable smile for him. It is the best reward ever. He says entrusting his wife to a servant might make him jealous. He warns her to hold on tight, which she doesn't even have time to react to, and he takes her in his arms. The embarrassed girl looks up into his face. She's embarrassed, but she likes it. She tries to break free from his strong arms and asks him to let her go, to which the guy, smiling and laughing, says that he will never get tired of admiring her face, and most importantly, when she is embarrassed. Goyo says Annecy has a very strange crush, and it's probably because of her personality. No one wanted to date him before her, to which Annecy mysteriously says anything is possible. But inside, Annecy is musing that summoning a spirit requires a certain clear emotion. Fire is the embodiment of fear. Earth is an indicator of loneliness. Wind demonstrates rage. And water is what just belongs to Goyo, embodies despair. The event moves to Annecy's office, where he's trying to kill time by stacking houses of cards. But suddenly someone walks into his office. His gaze is directed toward the doors. There's an assistant named Caleb Feather who says Annecy's wife's birthday is in January. But he also says that Annecy has not ordered the gift. Over this, Annecy shows no emotion and continues to play with the house. The servant suspects something and asks Mr. could he have forgotten his wife's birthday? Hearing these words, Annecy collapses the house of cards. The servant is a bit confused at this point. Annecy asks, what can be the options at this point? He is angry enough. Caleb Peroto asks Annecy if he told Goyo about his birthday, to which Annecy replies that Goyo doesn't need to worry about that he's being sent lots of gifts by others anyway, but the acolyte can't understand this logic. Annecy says that's not the problem at all. He asks his assistant what he thinks about Annecy and Goyo's relationship. He wants to hear exactly what he thinks. The aide thinks about it and says Annecy is sentimental, even a little crazy. But when Marquis hears this, he looks at his assistant with a fierce grin that makes him uncomfortable. The deputy gathers his thoughts and prepares to speak next. He is clearly worried. He began to say what he meant by referring to the Marquis as being madly in love with his wife. The Marquis ponders his words, and the aide goes on to say that the wedding has already taken place and there is no need for him to pretend anymore. He says that if he continues to pretend, what mistress might think if he continues to take care of her like this. Annecy asks if his aide wants him to become more cold-blooded. He also states that it's not a problem for him. At this point, he's thinking that if he suddenly changes his attitude towards her, how she might react to it. He thinks she'll definitely be surprised and a little confused at first. But that's first. Then she'll lock her heart away and just do the duties of a marquise. Then their relationship will never be the same as it is now. And then there will be a bland married life where we just say hello and goodbye. If Goyo becomes like this, chances are she'll never call him by his name again. And what's worse is that she'll never smile back at him again. After thinking it over, Marquis tells his assistant that he won't change. The Marquis gets up from his seat and goes to the window to think it over again. He thinks he's never met anyone with such a gentle character. He realizes she's a little stingy, which makes her seem a little stiff. But he constantly sees the despair she so hides from him. Deep in her heart, I try to hide it. And he wants to take her and hug her tightly every time. Such thoughts are very intrusive and hard to resist. He wants to kiss her mouth so that she presses her body against him and her hands clutch him, afraid to let him go. Annecy says it's not like him at all. The assistant confirms it and says that a devil of a battlefield like him shouldn't be able to do that at all. For allies are terrified at the mere sight of him, and even now the aide is afraid of him. Inside himself, the assistant realizes that the master doesn't want to admit that he looks head over heels in love. At this time, Goyo plays with his spirit and asks him to extinguish the candle spirit with filigree beauty of movements, fulfills the order of the mistress and extinguishes the candle. Mistress says that Vodin well done. Aelin sat down a little as she finished playing with the pet, because even a short challenge takes so much effort. Goyo thinks about what feeling he wanted to say about the power of water. Goyo thinks it was the first time Annecy Beetlejuice made a completely different impression. As the man who in the near future kills her, events take us to a moment in history before Goyo returns from that world. Angry Therio looks after the disappeared Marquis with the corpse of Goyo that was in the coffin. Therio tells himself that he must find Marquis no matter what it takes and clenches his fists tightly. The knights who were nearby promised to find Annecy. They mentioned that he headed for the Avalanche Mountains. But Therio can't leave everything to chance, so he takes control. He orders the second level and below to stay here and the special forces to follow him. Therio intends to bring back a family member Alte even likes into dangerous areas. While in the mountains, Annecy conjures over Goyo's body, releasing hieroglyphics from his hands and reciting magic words. He's determined to finish what he had to do, and to do that, he's using all his strength. At that moment, his faithful servant is next to the master, who tries to explain to the master that it is impossible to turn back time. But Annecy says it's not up to him, he's just doing what Chloe promised to do, so don't even let him try to stop him. But the servant doesn't give up, and says that this promise was made as a joke because Goyo's mother is just a distant relative of Mrs. Chloe. Didn't meet. How could this communication be about someone they were just blood with? But Annecy says that if Exer Freybeak doesn't understand what Goyo has to do with the promise, then just shut up. At this point, Caleb appears that the promise said that if Goyo chooses her own path, there is no need to interfere with it. Annecy asks what Caleb is doing here. Caleb replies that the gentleman doesn't have to worry. He won't stop him because he can't hear him anyway. The deputy says that Therio has sprung into action and that the Marquis will need their help. At this point, Annecy thinks that Therio is not such a useless jerk because he is so hard to find. At this time, the aide says it's no problem if turning back time was a mistake not to cover your tracks. Exer Freybeak says the soul will just shatter into pieces because it's impossible, but Caleb jokes and says who knows with his soul it won't happen except for a little bit. Exer Freybeak says it's no time to joke. He tries to stop the owner and tell him that he will lose the progress of all those long 10 years of work. The owner says it's not so clear-cut because he was angry at first because of the failures, but starting over is not so bad. Annecy says that Exer Freybeak is loyal to Chloe because she rescued him from slavery, and that's probably the same reason why he helps him to Annecy Betelgeuse receiver. The owner says he knows about the guy's fidelity because she doesn't belong to him. He says that even Chloe Valverde didn't know that their communication was a magical contract by which he can't let Goyo meet such a horrible end. Caleb asks the host why he should have entered into such a questionably naive contract. Exer Freybeak rebukes the master for acting recklessly, and he will die in breach of contract. But Annecy says he's still alive, which means there's a way back. If he wasn't, this situation wouldn't even be happening. Annecy turns to the assistant and asks, does he still think it's impossible? The deputy is speechless, shaking with hopelessness and helplessness. Annecy goes on to say that he did not feel a sense of satisfaction after becoming neither a marquis nor a duke, because this void will not be filled even by receiving the throne. So he thinks it's best to stop there and calls in a spell. The glow spreads to the area around Annecy, and Goyo Betelgeuse says the time is now. At that moment, he hears the address of Salyeb, who says that the gentleman's character is so bad that he is completely exhausted. And many times he wanted to strangle him with his own hands, but serving Annecy was a great honor for him. So he wishes to see happily in the past whatever there may be in the future. At this point, Annecy says goodbye, and as always, the smile never leaves his face. But at the last moment, Therio and his special squad find the great magician's rookery. Annecy at this point sees Therio, and as always, his confidence is crushed by enemies who I don't understand why he is so sure of himself. Therio orders his capture and rushes into the fray himself with a frenzied yell. And his hand is about to reach for Annecy, but at the last moment he disappears. and the entire world of back in time. Like all the hands of the clock turned backwards, Annecy finds herself in the water. It symbolizes the connectedness of Annecy from Solaris and the witch moon. Because on the day of the most powerful magic in the 1000th year, the child of a witch's day is usually weak and dies quickly. But this one is different from the others among the people born a real demon. Even the curse of the witch moon he cannot afford. He will bring with him a fateful, powerful, and dangerous force. There is no one in the world who could threaten his life. All Annecy thinks now is that he doesn't have the strength to go back in time, even if everything goes well. He'll have no memory of it, though his spell and mine will only stay with Goyo, and she'll have a choice of which way to go when she comes back from the dead. Events take us to the present, where Annecy asks Goyo about the tea party she was talking about today. She says she wants to try it since it's free, and the event is organized by Viscountess Ellie Vermis. The Vermus family are from the small ones. They are neither aristocrats nor commoners. Goyo didn't know about this and says it's very interesting. She says there are a lot of invitations, but she doesn't know where to go. Annecy says she's right because small gatherings are not burdensome or boring. But Annecy noticed something, his gaze sliding over Goyo's body, that made her a little uncomfortable. He asks the girl if she always dresses like that, to which she answers affirmatively with some surprise in her voice. Annecy says she looks good and he likes it. Goyo thinks she looks weird after hearing him say that, but Annecy says it's okay. Still, Annecy decided to give his wife some advice and suggested she add a little glamour, which would be nice. Annecy, as an experienced mage, can afford to do it himself. I apply my own spell. Goyo dress turns from an ordinary dress a real fashion statement. The girl is incredibly surprised at how beautiful this dress looks. See Puppy Joy. But that's not all. And Annecy has prepared the finishing touch for her little princess. The girl really liked the jewelry that made her favorite. Annecy says that it is not only beautiful, but now also stunning, and it suits her very well. Goyo is shocked at how talented Annecy is, and she asks him if he likes this style. Annecy replies, "What is it like to like more the previous one? In all aspects, it is better." He gives his hand to Goyo, who is a little confused and doesn't know what the right thing to do is. He says he has a lot to do at the palace on his way to take her to the Viscount. He says we have to show people how close we are. It'll be our first time out together. Goyo thinks for a while with a cute expression on her face, and yet she agrees and offers her lovely hand. She tells Annecy that this is one of her Marquis duties, which surprises the Marquis a bit. He tells her that it's not the primary reason. The girl hears that and asks what he means. Annecy says nothing and suggests that she go on, although inside he has bad doubts that he tries to hide from Goyo. Events continue at Viscount Vermis's castle, where they are met by Ellie Vermis and Rantafriti. They call Goyo by her maiden name and then ask that maybe they made a mistake and she's already Beetlejuice. Rantafriti says that Goyo dressed like a widow before her marriage. Why such a change? Did her rich husband influence her style so much? After saying that, she says it was all a joke because the Roubier family never complained about finances. Goyo thinks to herself that if she knew Rante would be here, she wouldn't have come. Rantafriti is a prominent member of the conservative faction. She has been declared heir to the Marquis of Frittle. Goyo doesn't understand why Rante is targeting her. The only assumption she has is that she is from a ducal family and has no talents whatsoever. At the girls' table, Emily Rayner says how wonderful it is to see Goyo in good health because there were unflattering rumors and she was concerned about them. Goyo can't understand what rumors Emily is talking about. Another girl named Bella Piari says that there were nasty rumors about Marquis Betelgeuse because he never had relationships with girls. There are a lot of girls in this room who have gotten rejected when they tried to express interest in him or ask him out. The girl says he has an assistant, Kolebo Parotto. She heard they've always lived together and stayed close. The girls at the table say it's a disgrace and start washing Marquis Betelgeuse's bones. But Goyo can't ignore this and asks the girls what they are implying about the Marquis's preference in men. To which Ranta says they're only discussing rumors here because he'd hardly get married if it were true. The girls at the table say that Goyo chose him over Therio, but that doesn't stop him from having a lover. The girls are very funny, but at the same time, Goyo sees nothing clever in their behavior. Ranta asks Goyo if she will complain to the Marquis about their conversations, to which Goyo says of course he will because it's an invasion of privacy. In the isocratic world, you can be sued for that, so don't let them get away with it. Ranta is a little concerned. She looks at Goyo with distrust. She crossed the line today, couldn't contain herself in her hands. Ran, you start making excuses and say she just told rumors. Maybe it's just because he's not of noble birth. What does he expect if he's never even kissed a girl before? Goyo says he should be careful, and she leaves because there's nothing else to discuss with them. When Goyo left, Rante said her family wasn't afraid of a commoner aristocrat. To which Goyo asks her, is her father as brave as she is? Bella asks, will they become enemies? Goyo will sue. Goyo looks with cold-blooded calmness at the cruel and vile women that like snakes weave their plots. The girls start to look at Erin with fear, seeing as she's not the least bit afraid of them. At the same moment, one of the girls knocks the tea over on Goyo. It was Rante, but now the tea was knocked over on her instead of Goyo, who can't understand what happened either.